Jai Ma. So today we take up Collected Works of the Mother, Volume 10 on Thoughts and Aphorisms. Um, it's a big dilemma because I would love to go with every aphorism, but right now we'll try to complete it today. And we'll see later on, we'll surely come back to these thoughts and aphorisms because they are, as the mother said, marvelous in every way to open our mind and heart and life to the integral vision of Sri Aurobindo. So, what is that integral vision? If we go through these thoughts and aphorisms, ultimate knowledge is that knowledge which reconciles and unites in a harmonious synthesis. Normally, we understand by self knowledge, knowing the self, discarding the world. By its very nature, it cannot be the complete knowledge. It can be an experience on the way, it is an experience on the way. But any knowledge which discards the world through which we have arrived at that knowledge, see the paradox, so cannot be the complete knowledge. So, in Sri Aurobindo's thought, we see this grand reconciliation of world and God, soul and nature. Also, true knowledge must reveal to us the ultimate reconciliation of dualities and the mutual oppositions. So, what we mean by that is if you read traditional Vedanta, it speaks about the life of dualities, that it speaks about. So, it says the ego lives in duality of pleasure and pain, good and evil, and there is the non dual consciousness which has nothing to do with it. This is a life of ignorance. But even in duality, there is a truth which is working. Through the dualities, it's working. So, true knowledge must be able to reconcile these mutual oppositions that we experience in duality, not by the way ego tries to reconcile them, but in a all-embracing God vision. The third is that again we see that what really is love of God. This simpler love of God is not just love for an exclusive God, excluding the universe. And if religions could only understand this, life would be so much more beautiful and harmonious. In the name of God, they commit slaughter, they destroy mankind, they destroy all that is noble and beautiful. If only one could understand that love of God is incomplete without love of the universe, not just human beings, but the entire creatures. So it should reconcile. Love of God should reconcile the highest ecstasy of love for the divine and also the divine manifestation. Because after all, what kind of love will it be which loves the creator but not his creation, curses the creation? It's we have to understand the meaning, secret hidden behind it. Similarly, no service of God can be complete unless it includes its within its range and scope every field and area of human activity, which includes science, which includes medicine, which includes physics, which includes chemistry. So it's not just that in the temple or in an ashram when we are doing certain kinds of works, we are doing God service. Every field should become a service of God. So all these things we find beautifully revealed to us through these thoughts and aphorisms. So let me quickly go to some of these. Something very interesting with Sri Aurobindo that people don't know whether he belongs to tradition or to modernity. Because he explains many of the traditions, reveals the truth behind them, but he doesn't subscribe or nor his disciples follow many of these traditions. He talks about the future, but he doesn't talk of blind modernity that imitate whatever is happening today's fashion, that this is the future or the new creation. So the basis is, Sri Aurobindo gives us, break the molds, 238 aphorism number. I'll only use the aphorism number. Break the molds of the past, but keep safe its gains and its spirit, or else thou hast no future. So that's why we see Sri Aurobindo on the one hand releases the truth within the Vedas, the Upanishads and the Gita, and takes aside all the forms and structures that have been built around it, and then releases this spirit, takes it further into the life divine and Savitri. So, this very interesting. The world has had only half a dozen successful revolutions, and most even of these were very like failures. Yet it is by great and noble failures that humanity advances. So it's not the outer success of failure that matters, but the faith and the intent that drives. So if there is the intent is noble and high, it may meet a failure number of times and yet it will eventually fulfill itself. So it is the faith and intent and not the immediate result that determines whether something is divinely inspired or not. And we have talked about it, spoken about it in different ways. Okay. So world will go through a phase of atheism as a purifying itself from many creeds. So Aurobindo says atheism is a necessary protest against the wickedness of the churches and the narrowness of creeds. God uses it as a stone to smash these soiled card houses. So that's why it's necessary. Many times people who just blindly believe because they want some benefit from God, and there are those who really want to understand why there is pain, suffering in creation. For instance, people could label Buddha as an atheist. People try to do that. They say that, well, he anatmavad, he's agnostic. But if you look at Buddha, he has his mighty impulse because he looks at suffering of mankind and wants to find a cure for it. How much hatred and stupidity men succeed in packing up decorously and labeling religion. And the mother says, so long as religions exist, atheism will be indispensable to counterbalance them. Both must disappear to make way for a sincere and disinterested search for truth and a total consecration to the object of this search. So there are two kinds of atheism. Basically what she is describing is, one is an atheism which acts as a priori denial to only live its own life of comforts and seeks pleasure because it's very convenient that there is no God, there is no divine. Then it can do whatever it feels like. It's not this atheism that Aurobindo is referring to, but an atheism which is really seeking for truth. And it doesn't find that truth in all the teachings of religions or creeds, or it finds some incompleteness, some imperfection. That's why it revolts against the Shastra. It's not a revolt necessarily against God, but against the way God is presented to us in the form of these cults and creeds. That's what it is. Aurobindo is revealing to us. Now this one, we all can hold our breath. God guides best when He tempts worst. Loves entirely when He punishes cruelly. Helps perfectly when violently He opposes. So all that we call as oppositions from the world, resistances that we meet, the difficulties, the challenges, these two are in the highest vision, somewhere permitted by the divine. And why are they permitted? So that we can grow more and more perfect. There is a very nice line in one of the Hindi poems dedicated to Krishna. बहुत कठिन है डगर पन घटकी. So the story goes that every time the gopis would bring water and they are chit-chatting and suddenly Krishna will break the matki. So they feel very disheartened. Oh my God, I have to bring it again. Now I have modified this story that every time the matki was broken, some seeds on the ground were watered. But that apart, that's not part of the original story. The thing is, there is some imperfection, and every time we meet an opposition or difficulty, it means that there is egoism, there is desire, there is a seeking for something lower in our nature, which is we are unconscious of it. It is concealed, and through these, the divine is revealing to us. This is a good one. Reason gives me no basis for this faith. So there are people who say that, what is the basis for this faith in the supramental or the new creation? Though there is a logic behind it. And the logic is very simple, childishly simple. If creation has come from dust to man, one thing is certain, that it cannot stop with man. And if you look at the aspirations of man, it will be very clear which direction it is going, because ultimately it fulfills the dreams and aspirations within. And the aspiration of man, regardless of whatever outwardly he may do, is always for a more and more perfect creation, for Ram Rajya, for an ideal state, for a perfect life. So, reason gives me no basis for this faith. Thou murmurest, fool, if it did, faith would not be needed or demanded of thee. So faith by its nature is blind. And that's why Mother says, what men usually call blind faith is in fact what the divine grace sometimes gives to those whose intelligence is not developed enough to have true knowledge. So blind faith can be something very respectable, although it is of course clear that one who has true knowledge is in a superior position. So those who go through it and arrive at true knowledge, they obviously... Similarly, sometimes when we seek a great aim, but we say, how are we going to do it? All the situations, circumstances are completely opposed to it. So what does the mother say? Aurobindo say, if thy aim be great and thy means small, still act, for by action alone these can increase to thee. And it applies at every level. And in sadhana it is so necessary. I can't concentrate, I can't meditate, I can't read. Doesn't matter. Still, even that 1 inch, that Kalidas story, that Rasri avat jatate silpar padat nishan, that by every time on the stone, even a water dropping on the stone eventually leaves a mark. So that should be by action, it begins to be, the means increase. So people often speak about God's command and they start straight away hearing voices. It's okay, God's command may come like that. But what are the forms in which God's command may come? There are 3 forms in which the command may come. The will and faith in thy nature. If there is the will that the new creation should come, then that is the command for us. It will come as a settled will and faith. Thy ideal on which heart and brain are agreed, and the voice of himself or his angels. So it may come as a voice, or it may come as an inspiration, an ideal, or as will and faith in the heart. This is very interesting, that everybody enters into yoga wanting, now I have become an ashramite, or I have entered into yoga, my life is going to be very smooth and everything would be wonderful. And at the first challenge they tend to, why this is happening to me, means God should ensure everything, every step right up to the end. He does, but there is a reason why we have the challenges. And that Aurobindo is revealing to us, he who would win high spiritual degrees must pass endless tests and examinations. Mother says there are 3 kinds of examinations. Divine does not test, he knows us. Mother is on our side. So where do these tests come from? They come from universal forces of nature. They don't want to concede going beyond them. So when a person ends up saying, "This is my nature, I can't help it," that means he has failed the test. They come from hostile and adverse forces, which suggests us the contrary. They'll fill us with depressions, confusions, etc. And they come from spiritual forces. They will give us some quick results or some kind of a lure for a heavenly beyond, etc., etc. So these tests come. But most are anxious only to bribe the examiner. So we have this tendency and mentality. Then there are long passages sometimes for a seeker when no progress is made and it seems everything is dull, mechanical. One continues. Then the mother have said, "Don't stop, continue, even if it is mechanical." But this happens to every sadhak and seeker. Sri Aurobindo himself says there was a time when for 6 months he went through a state where there was no advance taking place, almost a depressing state. And that is for Sri Aurobindo. That constancy of aspiration, burning heart. So he reminds us, if thy heart is troubled within thee, if for long seasons thou makest no progress, if thy strength faint and repine, remember. What should we remember when all this is happening? Remember always the eternal word of a lover and master. I will free thee from all sin and evil. Do not grieve. Aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma sucham. And something which nowadays we are experiencing. See, they are the highest noble ideals of the Aryan race. One is, it is noble to pardon thy own injurers, but not so noble to pardon wrongs done to others. It's one thing to say that, there's direct, we can say, they were, if you want to follow non-violence, ahimsa, if somebody has done wrong to you, it's all right. You want to follow it as an ideal, do it. But when there are others who have been attacked and you say, no, you must practice ahimsa, you must face and suffer, that is so silly. To pardon. And then he says, nevertheless pardon these two, but when needful, calmly avenge. Why avenge? Somebody asked that. Why should one calmly avenge? And it's because the balance of justice is as important. In fact, is needed before the reign of truth can come. If you don't do that, then a person who is on the path of evil may continue to. It's not just about you. It's about the world. It's about even that person, how he is dealing with the world. So sometimes so important. And this one, when Asiatics massacre, it is an atrocity. Sounds very familiar. When Europeans, it is a military exigency. Appreciate the distinction and ponder over this world's virtues. Now, people are openly speaking about it. That when anyone in Asia does anything, see, Russia against Ukraine, oh, look, is it? Everything has been painted as a black, picture. But when Iraq is invaded, Afghanistan is conquered, all this is military exigency. Whether military exigency or the oil exigency, who knows? So this is the Sri Aurobindo is pointing out. Private dispute should always be avoided, but shrink not from the public battle. Yet even then appreciate even there appreciate the strength of thy adversary. And something which goes with it, which is so important in our everyday practice. When thou hearest an opinion that displeases thee, study and find out the truth in it. Something, why am I displeased and hurt? Something I am missing. Somebody is saying something which may be very critical of me. I must study and see if there is a truth in it. If there is a truth, to change. If there is no truth, then it's okay. We can discard it. And this one, people often hear, about women, that women in the spiritual path are cause of downfall, etc., etc. Aurobindo is setting the score straight. The medieval ascetics hated women and thought they were created by God for the temptation of monks. It's true. Many of the Semitic religions, that's why they didn't allow for a long time women to enter into monasteries or women to enter into... Swami Vivekananda was one of the first ones, even Buddha had done that women can become part as monks. Look at what Aurobindo says. One may be allowed to think more nobly, both of God and of woman. How degraded is our thought that, that woman was made to tempt man. And then another one. If a woman has tempted thee, is it her fault or thine? Be not a fool and a self-deceiver. And the final one. So people may ask, how are we to avoid this snare, so-called snare? There are two ways of avoiding the snare of woman. He's not saying woman is a snare, but snare of woman. One is to shun all women, which is what ascetics do, and the other to love all beings. You love all beings. It's not about woman, man, whatever way people may look at it. Okay. 329. There is nothing small in God's eyes. Let there be nothing small in thine. He bestows as much labor of divine energy on the formation of a shell as on the building of an empire. For thyself, it is greater to be a good shoemaker than a luxurious and incompetent king. This is a story of the mother. When a child went to see her, or rather a minister was waiting for her, 2 hours the mother was busy. Doing what? A child had come to see her and her frock had become dirty because ink had entered. And she is cleaning that frock. So somebody asked the mother, there is a minister waiting. He finally got restless and went away. Then mother says, this child has given her entire life to me. And one would see how she would pay meticulous attention. Even dining room, she taught how to clean the vessels. Every small detail, every small thing. So this idea that there are big things and there are small things, samam brahman, they contradict that. And then they are, okay, and whether we keep waiting for changes of government to solve our problems. So, 344. This erring race of human being dreams always of perfecting their environment by the machinery of governments and society. This is the big mistake. But it is only by the perfection of the soul within that the outer environment can be perfected. What thou art within, that outside thee thou shalt enjoy. No machinery can rescue thee from the law of thy being. So it's so important. The other day, that's small little thing I had with someone. He said, when will Akhand Bharat come? Akhand Bharat will come when we live in that consciousness of Akhand. Right now we ourselves are so divided on language, on state, on caste, creed, God knows how many things. Even within, I'm talking of even within the Hindu society. Leave aside, others' understanding. So even within the Hindus, we are so divided. How can we have Akhand Bharat? When we heal this division inside, then Akhand Bharat will manifest spontaneously, automatically. In fact, effortlessly. There are some very interesting ones on health and illness and on medical science. They are worth reading. They are from page 386 onwards. Now it's, this 387. Medical science has been more a curse to mankind than a blessing. It has broken the force of epidemics and unveiled a marvelous surgery. First, he recognizes. But also, it has weakened. It has weakened the natural health of man and multiplied individual diseases. It has implanted fear and dependence in the mind and body. It has taught our health to repose not on natural soundness, but a rickety and distasteful crutch compact from the mineral and vegetable kingdom. So, this is where he reminds us that the healthiest ages of mankind were those in which there were the fewest material remedies. But now we have entered into marketing, and that's going to made it worse. So I remember even when I was doing my medicine, so we had very few antibiotics. We were very happy. But we were happy because we didn't have to learn the names of so many medicines. We didn't know that one day we'll have to learn. Very easy. Antibiotics you have to prescribe. Sulfadiazine, nobody uses now. And at this ampicillin had come, that was like a big revolution. And doxycycline. And penicillin was injection. Then tablet penicillin came. All this, that's all. I was so happy. And they worked. We are living proof that they worked. And then within 10 years, the market started getting flooded and flooded. And sometimes I feel pity for these, now the youngsters who are entering into the medical profession. They are going to ruin their mind just remembering all these. So many names. And they are changing every year. The same medicine today, they will say this is very effective. Perfect. Then the next year, new antibiotic comes after 2 years, new medicine. So either you were telling a lie that time, or you are telling a lie now. So, and then Aurobindo says, it should take long for self-cure to replace medicine. Because of the fear, self-distrust, and unnatural physical reliance on drugs, which medical science has taught to our minds and bodies and made our second nature. We cannot counteract the harm done by mental faith in the need for drugs by any external measures, only by escaping from the mental prison. See, today we have so many, for instance, cholesterol. Now, very few people are aware that cholesterol is made in the body. So, something made in the body, 80% of it, and you say it's all harmful. Okay, if you have anything in excess, it's harmful. But what is that excess? So, and now people, there are books written on that, but they'll never come to the mainstream. And people will never dare to stop that because now they are afraid that if I stop it, I'm going to have a heart attack, I'm going to die. Same thing with bypass surgeries, that you are going to die in one day. But if you tell the doctor that, I need at least 1 week to get the money, then he'll say, okay, 1 week you can stay. Then if you say that, well, I have to make arrangements maybe 1 month or 2 months, okay, 2 months is fine. No, in England, you have to wait for 1 year sometimes just to get the surgery done. So what happens? So this is emergency, push it through. He is as if you feel that you went to the doctor, but there is Yamaraj speaking through him. Boy, I am knocking at your door. Don't you see? He is such an angel who has saved you. I am sorry, many doctor friend, but I, being a doctor myself, can laugh at it. And there is no immediate, because the fear has gone into the very body. During the corona, even within our setup, when I used to tell them, people would say, why aren't you wearing a mask? You are passing the infection. I said, first of all, technically it is not correct. Second is that how about passing health? How about getting rid of fear? So in Aurobindo, I believe they had this. Within Aurobindo, they didn't use masks, as far as I know. And they would not allow it because they said you are passing fear to people. And I fully appreciate that's the way it should be. Now we come to bhakti. But we'll read only a few. Each one is a marvel. The mother says, devotion is the key which opens the door to liberation. Very simple, because if union with the divine is the goal, then love is the fastest way. Because whatever we love, we begin to become like the person whom we love. And there are people busy turning Sri Aurobindo into a philosopher and a thinker. But look, Sri Aurobindo, right from beginning, if you see, there is a very strong element of bhakta. His very first experience with Lele, everybody talks about the silence. But nobody knows that how he implicitly trusted, and he was asked this question. He said, because he came and told me, I completely surrendered myself and had complete trust in the guidance. And even later on he says that I had this experience not because of my effort, but because of the grace of the Guru or of Krishna and Kali, if you like. He didn't attribute it to his own efforts. But people are busy, I want to have silence in mind by my effort. And everybody will speak about Sri Aurobindo as a philosopher or maybe a great yogi. But the bhakta within his heart, Bhavani Bharati, read Bhavani Bharati, Durga Strot, all through the writings. Savitri, you see nothing but bhakti coming through in its own way. But he's not a traditional bhakta, just as he's not a traditional jnani yogi saying not this, not this, not this, and just realize the self. So he says, I am not a bhakta, for I have not renounced the world for God. How can I renounce? Now comes the next line. How can I renounce what he took away from me by force and gave back to me against my will? Look at the beauty of these lines. These things are too hard for me. I am not a bhakta. I am not a jnani. I am not a worker for the Lord. What am I then? He is breaking all these paradigms of, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga. People want to put Sri Aurobindo in his slot. He is none of the above and all of the above. All these together and something more. That's the beauty of Sri Aurobindo. What am I then? A tool in the hands of my master. Look at, what bhakti can be. A flute blown upon by the divine herd boy. Herd boy is Krishna, of course. A leaf driven by the breath of the Lord. And this one's so wonderful. The final majesty of, correcting the balance of Vedanta, which ultimately goes to Purusha. Even in Tantra, ultimately the Devi is a gateway to the Purusha, which has led to so much one-sidedness in Indian thought. Other places there is no feminine, so we can see and understand why these religions and cults became so fierce, ruthless, because they completely eliminated the feminine. The church still had some respect for Mother Mary, and even they murmur, whisper Mary the Magdalene, but they generally don't acknowledge it. Islam is like nothing of feminine. Feminine come later. They quote a verse that after God there is mother, physical mother, not the mother, but physical mother. What does Sri Aurobindo say? After I knew that God was a woman, after I knew that God was a woman, I learned something from far off about love. But it was only when I became a woman and served my master and paramour that I knew love utterly. This is a very powerful one, and when I had read it, I was reminded of the story in Mahabhagavat Puran where Shiv asked Kali for the secrets, and she says, 2 secrets I can give you, but the third you won't understand. So he says, why? So he says, for the third you have to become a woman. He says, okay. So as the story goes, that Shiva becomes a woman in Krishna avatar. He becomes Draupadi, who is also regarded as Kali avatar. And Shama becomes Shama. So Sham, when in the battlefield, if you see, of course he is Krishna, but as Kali revealing here, his whole everything is like Kali that time. And then Shiva learns what is the secret of love through which one joins with the divine. This story is similar to, or something similar in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's story also, where Radha tells Krishna, you have not done enough for mankind. He says, what do you mean? I did everything. I gave mankind the Gita. He says, you really believe people will follow Gita? I mean, I'm humanizing the story, but that's how the story. You really believe people can follow all that? Nishkam karma and, equanimity, it's not easy. He says, what else can I do? He said, you should have given love. That is the key. That Radha has given. People don't understand because they look up to you. He says, what to do now? So Krishna and Radha joined together and they are born as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's how the story goes. That he was a joint Ansh avatar of the two. And therefore he released on one side streams of bhakti as never before. On the other side, he carried in himself so much identification with Krishna that at one time he almost assumes the Chakradhari roop. So, 4:3:1. The philosophers who reject the world as Maya are very wise and austere and holy. One has to understand Sri Aurobindo's touch of humor with a very gentle irony. He says, yes, who reject the world as Maya are very wise and austere and holy. But I cannot help thinking sometimes that they are also just a little stupid and allow God to cheat them too easily. So, and then there are a lot of things on mayavad, one of them which is very beautiful. And 4:3:4, beyond personality, the mayavadin sees indefinable existence. I followed him there and found my Krishna beyond an indefinable personality. That's the Purushottama. Shar, Akshar and the Purushottama. That's experience is reminding. Lot of them with Sri Krishna, very sweet ones. One of the sweetest relations that you can find is Sri Aurobindo with Sri Krishna. 2-3 of them. They go in series. When I first met Krishna, I loved him as a friend and playmate till he deceived me. So, actually you can't speak on these. These are so powerful and beautiful. Then I was indignant and could not forgive him. Afterwards, I loved him as a lover. So no more playmate and friend, as a lover. And he still deceived me. I was again and much more indignant, but this time I had to pardon. What do you do with lover? You're loving him. You can't help loving. This is the stages. After offending, next stage is, after offending, how does he offend? He lures you. You reach, I found him. Then he vanishes the other day. Then he says, I am there. Then with great difficulty you go there. Again he vanishes. Again he is there. So he says, after offending, He forced me to pardon him, not by reparation, but by committing fresh offenses. Because he understood what is Krishna's play. Aurobindo says he is a very exacting Godhead. Though his smile is so bewitching and looks very easy, he is not easy to please. But once you follow him, chase him, you can't leave him. That's the beauty of Krishna. And then he goes further. So long as God tried to repair his offenses against me, we went on periodically quarreling. But when he found out his mistake, the quarreling stopped, for I had to submit to him entirely. Basically, he is doing all this at the end so that we can surrender to him completely. Sarva dharman parityaja. And then all this ceases. When I saw others than Krishna and myself in the world, I kept secret God's doings with me. But since I began to see him and myself everywhere, I have become shameless and garrulous. So he speaks of Krishna at one place as a double, his own double. And at one point he says to Sahanadi, you saw Krishna join with him. Who else but Krishna can unite with me? So what is that relation? Okay. This, of course, all favorite. To love God, excluding the world, is to give him an intense but imperfect adoration. So this all those bhakti cults which ultimately go to the temple and just end up worshipping God there. They forget the Kurukshetra Krishna. And that's why we don't hardly find his images. Images are there, but temples dedicated to Krishna on the battlefield. They are more happy with Krishna, the dancer in the Vrindavan, than something for those who talk about love. People ask about jealousy. Here is an aphorism to cure jealousy. One line aphorism. Put it on the door and put it on the heart and practice it. Is love only a daughter or handmaid of jealousy? If Krishna loves Chandrabali, so is Chandrabali. Shri Krishna loved Radha best among the gopis, but he loved Chandrabali and the other gopis also. If Krishna loves Chandrabali, why should I not love her also? If you love someone, you love everyone and everything connected with the person. Why won't you love? Why would you create a division? So jealousy is itself a sign that it's either no love or an imperfect, egoistic love. Okay. This another very beautiful one. These aphorisms are in the end mother had taken and she didn't give much commentary. So 464, God has arranged. This is something very, very beautiful. People who are in worldly life, they have this duty, that duty. And they say, how can I have time to love God? And how can I practice this, that? People are always engaged in some duty or the other. So Aurobindo, with this characteristic humor, God has so arranged life that the world is the soul's husband. Now look at how he is smashing our notions. God has so arranged life that the world is the soul's husband. Krishna is divine paramour. So you end up loving the paramour always. Husband is duty. Husband won't like it, but that's the truth. Husband is duty. But who should be the paramour? Krishna. There he says. We owe a debt of service to the world, to the husband, and are bound to it by a law. He is your husband, so you have no choice. A compelling opinion and a common experience of pain and pleasure. That's what links us to husband and wife. But our heart's worship and our free and secret joy are for our lover. What a strong, powerful. He smashes. all our ideas and opinions. And one, this is something so beautiful. What are the kinds of relations we can form with God? This is another beautiful thing about Sanatana Dharma, especially. Somehow nowadays it has come, God is only guru or teacher, guru, teacher, guru, teacher. Or God is just up there. Or God is, you have to be afraid of God all the time. But India has taught so many ways to love God and so many kinds of relationship. And we can form this with Mother Aurobindo. What are these different kinds of relationships? And the mother did not like much when people treated her like a guru. She said, I see. In fact, once he comments with a touch of irony, I see, you want me to act like a guru. You put me on a pedestal there and you want to treat me like a guru who should sort out your problems. He says, I am much more happy to be the universal mother of all. Discipleship to God the teacher, one of them. God is the teacher, He teaches us things and we should follow those things. Sonship to God the Father. He is a father. And when He is the Father, what is there to worry? Tenderness of God the Mother. When we are bruised by the world, hurt and wounded, where do we like to go? Even in movie, what was that movie? Diwar. He is an atheist, absolute atheist, doesn't believe in God. He won't enter the temple. But when he is bruised, this hero Amitabh Bachchan, and he is totally hurt. All his life he has lived the life of a victim card or whatever victim. In the end, he just simply says, Mama, I just want to sleep in your lap. Only mothers can love like that, the tenderness they have. So the tenderness of God the Mother. And that's the beauty with God as Mother. She may scold us, sometimes even give us a little slap, but she will always protect us from the world. Always heal our wounds and our hurts because she is Mother. By the very... And Aurobindo goes on to say that the mother likes that the child soul goes to her in all difficulties. Even asks her, demands her, because this is a relation. Mothers love it best. If a child says, no, now I am grown up. I don't need you. I can manage things on myself. Mother is very unhappy. At some point she feels some hollowness in the heart. She says, okay, everything I know, but still, I am so happy when you come and tell me that I want to eat this particular dish. Clasp of the hand of the divine friend. Laughter and sport with our comrade and boy playfellow. We can laugh with God, sport with God. Blissful servitude to God the Master. Rapturous love of a divine paramour. Nobody knows whom one really loves. Everybody says he loves this, he loves that, he loves this one. Fools. Nobody knows whom you really love. After loving God, can one really love another the way we understand? So, Aurobindo says, these are the 7 beatitudes of life in the human body. Canst thou unite all these in a single supreme and rainbow-hued relation? Then hast thou no need of any heaven, and thou exceedest the emancipation of the Advaitin. This is the highest realization one can have. While in the human body, to have these manifold relations with God. What does He want us to become? Often people there used to be a joke here. I'm saying it in a lighter vein. Those, devotees of Tagore shouldn't take offense, but there used to be a joke, not by Aurobindo and the mother, but people here. That you send a strong man to Shantiniketan and he will develop some effeminate characters. Very tender, soft, painter and all that music, which is nice, nothing wrong with that. And you send a girl here who is very tender and very soon she'll become capable of beating a man black and blue. It has happened here. She'll become like Kali. So, Aurobindo says, when will the world change into the model of heaven? when all mankind becomes boys and girls together, with God revealed as Krishna and Kali. Not saying Krishna and Radha, that ideal is how this world will become. The happiest boy and strongest girl of the crowd. Look here, he's not saying the strongest boy and the beautiful girl of the crowd. No, this idea of tenderness, weakness with beauty. Shobindar, the mother, have removed it. If somebody is very weak and fragile, girls carry this ideal, chui mui, somebody should help me, support me. That's not the ideal for a girl. She should be strong. She should support the man. Actually, that's how we see Savitri. The happiest boy and strongest girl of the crowd playing together in the garden of paradise, gardens of paradise. The Semitic Eden was well enough. There also they were playing together with innocent love. But the problem was, but Adam and Eve were too grown up. And it's God himself, too old and stern and solemn for the offer of the serpent to be resisted. Of course, Jehovah Mother says that, he is an Asuric being and taken the form. The Semites have afflicted mankind with the conception of a God who is stern and dignified king and solemn judge and knows not mirth. So recently I was sharing this with a Muslim boy. Somebody asked that, but how do you reconcile God as loving with all these laws where you can be mundi kaat dega, hey, there's all these things, you can be punished for an offense. How can you reconcile all this? He said, but who told you God is loving? He has given rules, you have to follow it. If you don't follow, you will be punished. If you follow, when you die, you will be rewarded. That's very strong. You just can't argue after that. There is nothing like loving God. So he says, they gave us this conception of God who is a stern and dignified king and solemn judge. He sees black and white. There are no grays. And knows not mirth. He cannot laugh. But we who have seen Krishna know him for a boy fond of play and a child full of mischief and happy laughter. So a God who cannot laugh would not have made this wonderful world. That's what Aurobindo says. And then he also speaks of the aphorism of Krishna stealing the robes, which he says, as men are, that they bring into a story. So stealing the robes is that when you let God take the robe of vice, we are happy. But when he plucks at the robe of virtue, we don't like it. But that's what, unless we also let go of the robe of virtue, how are we going to rise above good and evil into the utter light of truth? So, this very powerful is something which comes also in the Aurobindo's poem, The Rishi, when the Rishi gives the last advice to Manu. The advice that he gives in poetic form, you'll find it in poem Rishi toward the end. When Manu says, all this you have explained to me, tell me the gist, final thing. So what he says in a poem, Aurobindo writes here in an aphorism, love of man, love of woman, love of things, love of thy neighbor, love of thy country, love of animals, love of humanity, are all the love of God reflected in these living images. So, love and grow mighty to enjoy all, to help all, and to love forever. It liberates us from all small little ideas, conceptions, and what a vastness. And then he speaks that divine love has these two movements. One is universal, which is like a cushion behind everything, and the other is personal, where it deals with each one in his own unique way and relates in a personal way. So what is real suffering? And what is real happiness? Because we say, I turn to God, but see what my life has become. But what is real joy and real suffering for a God seeker and a God lover? The greatest of joys is to be Like Narad, the slave of God. The worst of hells being abandoned of God to be the world's master. Even if you are a world's master, but you don't feel that contact with the divine, that's the greatest hell. And Narad is roaming all over the world. He even goes to Asur Lok. Anywhere he goes. But he is a slave of God. So he contrasts the two. That which seems nearest to the ignorant conception of God is the farthest from him. That somebody has been given good success, good money. Well, if you are seeking these things, you don't need to turn to God. There are so many ways. Just join the share market. Don't turn him into a, somebody, God, who is only connected with making the share market go up and down. And then very powerful, one of my favorite ones. God's servant is something. God's slave is greater. So what is the difference between servant and slave? Servant is on wages. Servant has a fixed time. 8 to 4. Okay. Sometimes people say, and I find it very funny, these are your timings. I say, you want to fix timings for God's service. And God's service you want to limit to this or that, but it's important at one point. So that is God's servant. Anyways, nice thing, good. But who is a slave? Slave is 24/7 at God's service. Slave means that by definition. What is his wage? He is given no wage. His only wage is that you will be always with the master. Because you have to serve him whenever he wants. So that is the difference between God's servant and slave. Sugriva is God's servant. Hanuman is his slave. That's why after the whole Ramayana is over and they come to Ayodhya and then all the Vanars finally decide, okay, we'll go back. Hanuman says, I am not going anywhere. No, but you belong to Kishkinda. No, you are supposed to go back to Kishkinda. He says, what do you mean I belong to Kishkinda? I belong to you. And there is nowhere for me to go but where you go. Then knowing this, Mata Sita takes from him a promise. Because she knows this is dangerous. He says, whatever it be, you will always be slave of Rama? He says, yes. He says, okay. Even if I am not there, you will serve him as a slave. He says, yes. Then he doesn't realize what she is training him for. That God's servant is something, God's slave is greater. And these two very powerful. They are so sobering, so humbling. Because we develop this idea that somebody living in the ashram is very close to God and doing something great. No doubt ashram is very special. But we must always remember, there are two works that are perfectly pleasing to God in His servant. What are these two works? To sweep in silent adoration His temple floors. This we all know. Second one, and to fight in the world's battlefield for His divine consummation in humanity. Here are the two extremes. One is where He is always in the temple, sweeping His floors. And the other is where He is far and wide into the world, fighting. Fighting doesn't mean using a gun, but as a force of God's light and love for His divine consummation of humanity. And this one, He who has done even a little good to human beings. Sometimes we create these oppositions. Human beings, they are, I have to love only God. I have heard people, somebody who used to love an animal, and poor girl, 20 must be, she went to meet one elderly sadhak. He said, what is all this love for animals, etc.? You have to love only God. This all attachment. So she was so confused and she asked me, he says, he doesn't know love. He may be here for many decades, but doesn't understand love. So here is something. He who has done even a little good to human beings, though he be the worst of sinners, is accepted by God in the ranks of His lovers and servants. He shall look upon the face of the eternal. What a powerful assurance. Nowhere else He is giving this assurance. And the mother adds her seal, final stamp. She says, Sri Aurobindo's effort was always directed towards liberating his disciples or even his readers from all preconceptions, all conventional morality. The people who will say helping mankind, they quote. They don't understand the deeper sense. Of course, if you do things egoistically, whether you are, working in an ashram or elsewhere, it is obviously egoism and God realization don't go together. But outwardly, he is talking of these actions. And here is about Kali. Kali is Krishna revealed as dreadful power and wrathful love. She slays with her furious blows the self in body, life, and mind in order to liberate it as spirit eternal. And the mother, shall we complain when we see this helpless little ego disappearing and giving way to a luminous spark capable of understanding the universe? And therefore, when every time life fails and we are driven out, some people complain, my children have driven me out. Thank God. You are lucky. My husband has left me. So fortunate. Because you could have never left him. Duty would have bound you. I mean, for a God seeker, I am saying, somebody who is in love of God, wants nothing else to stand. So Sri Aurobindo says, God drives us out of every Eden that we may be forced to travel through the desert to a divine paradise. There are so many people who have come here like that, driven out of their so-called comfort zones. And then they end up here so beautifully. If thou wonder why should that parched and fierce transit be necessary through the desert, then art thou befooled by thy mind and hast not studied thy soul behind and its dim desires and secret raptures. And I think the last one. Okay, last 2 or 3, we'll just read them and then close. See God everywhere and be not frightened by masks. What are the masks? Falsehood, terror. Believe that all falsehood is truth in the making or truth in the breaking. Things which have to pass out of existence, which were once useful, like Islam. Modern Islam is something which is passing away, whatever its utility was. Many religions are like that. Truth in the breaking. All failure and effectuality concealed, all weakness, strength hiding itself from its own vision. One has to keep on striving for the strength to emerge. All pain a secret and violent ecstasy. If thou believest firmly and unweariedly that all this is a mask, that faith we have to have. One day the mask will yield and the truth will be revealed. If you continue to have this faith, in the end thou wilt see and experience the all true, almighty and all blissful. This is required to keep on persisting in this faith. The rejection of falsehood by the mind seeking after truth is one of the chief causes why mind cannot attain to the settled, rounded and perfect truth. It's because it throws the baby with the bathwater. Even what we call as falsehood holds within it a seed of truth. Mother speaks of as the ingot of gold, you have to bring it out. Attachment is falsehood because it's attachment to the outer form, but it holds within it a seed of love. So people try to throw both, but we have to do a very microsurgery, rather the divine does the microsurgery. Like he says, attachment is egoism in love. When you remove it, then true love will be there. So this is one example. And then he says there are so many profound truths which are like weapons, dangerous to the unpracticed wielder. That's why all these small codes going around, one should be so careful. Rightly handled, they are the most precious and potent in God's armory. And finally, the last one. Canst thou see God in thy torturer and slayer, even in thy moment of death or thy hours of torture? These are all his experiences. He read his writings when he is under the British Empire's. His stand is so different. Not out of any personal hatred, not out of any such thing. Very different stand. Canst thou see him in that which thou art slaying? See and love even while thou slayest. Thou hast thy hand on the supreme knowledge. That's what Krishna has been given the command, not out of hatred, anger, or anything like that. Not because he doesn't, but because that is the need of the moment as a dharma in his heart, of God in the heart. And then he says, how shalt he attain to Krishna who has never worshipped Kali? This is a course correction for our worshippers of Krishna. Last comment of the mother, 8th June 1970, one line for this aphorism. All is the divine, and the divine alone exists.